Well, welcome everyone to another fantastic episode of Recovering from RfRx. This is a Recovering from Religion production called RfRx. I am your host today, and my name is Eric Wells. I'm the support group director, and with me as my co-host is my fantastic friend Helen Greene. She's an ambassador as well as the virtual support group leader. Welcome, Helen. I'm so glad you're here today.
Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. We're going to have a great talk tonight. It's going to be awesome. Happy Monday, everybody. Let's get going.
Folks, at the beginning of every RfRx, we have a poll, and today is no different. The questions here that we have here in the poll are designed to kind of get you in the mindset of what we're going to be thinking about today or talking about today. So today we have two questions. The first question is, have you sought mental health therapy within the last year? Yes, no, or I'm not sure. Question number two, have you ever had a therapist suggest some religious activity during the session? For example, like, hey, go pray on it some more, or check out this Bible verse, or something that you might feel is religious and possibly inappropriate during the therapy session. So RfRx, some of you, this may be the very first time you're here, and welcome. Others, it's so good to see you here again. RfRx, this is a weekly show. Every Monday night we have this here in the US, and it goes all over the world. We bring on guests to talk about different topics that are relevant to the folks who come to Recovering from Religion for help. Now, this is not at all a replacement for the online community. It's not at all a replacement for the helpline or a replacement for the support groups. In fact, this is more complementary to those programs. So many times as we're having these conversations on Monday night, over the rest of the week, these things may come up in the helpline or in the support groups or in the online community, because a lot of great topics that we talk about may trigger some thoughts and feelings and emotions that we didn't really know were there beforehand. So the guests here are fantastic, and they provide some good advice and some coping skills. If you have any questions or comments or inquiries, you can email us at rfrx@recoveringfromreligion.org. And if you miss any of this or part of this RfRx, it will be up on YouTube eventually, and you can check out this recording along with nearly 100 other RfRx episodes over on our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/recoveringfromreligion. Okay, Helen, it's your turn. Tell us about RfR.
Okay, so those of you who are not familiar with Recovering from Religion, what are we? What do we do? Well, let me tell you. So our mission statement is to offer hope, healing, and support to those struggling with issues of doubt and non-belief. And how do we do this? Well, first, let me talk about healing. So the most important aspect of this is that if you are dealing with any sort of religious doubt, a fundamentalist upbringing, or even just like a fear of hell, and you could be out for 2 days or 20 years, or you're somewhere on that journey, just call or chat in to one of our, go to the website, you can call or chat in. And one of our trained agents will offer a sympathetic ear and offer resources with no judgment. They're not in the business of trying to deconvert or anything like that. It's just offering a supportive ear that's going to listen to you without judgment and kind of help you where you are at. You are available 24/7. And also too, we can be on your time. So let's say there's a particular time of day that is good for you to get a call or a chat, and you can schedule that as well. And also you can visit our resource page, which Eric will put up in the chat, and that has a bunch of resources that offers any sort of articles, books, videos, anything that on a particular topic dealing with religion and non-belief. And that information is there to kind of help you along the way as well. The next part is hope. So the best thing to do, way to do this is we found through RfR, and I know that I found this just in my daily life, is that sharing stories with people that are similar to you and finding support through them is one of the best ways to kind of help you on this journey. And we do this through listening to personal stories, finding a bond with people that are kind of in the same boats that we are. So we do this through our blog and our podcast, where you can see old you can see our old podcasts and blogs of things of people that are just sharing their stories and talking about their own process of dealing with going through doubt and kind of unplugging from religion and seeing what that looks like as well. So I know, Eric, you want to talk about support because it's your favorite thing. So go ahead.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Helen, for letting me talk about the support group program. I love it. Folks, I'm the support group director, and I think the support group program is the best, but I'm not biased at all. That's for sure. The support groups, this is where we get to meet face to face, whether it's in person or it's virtual, and we can, it's a safe space for us to share how religion has harmed us, what we've been going through, our doubts, our fears, our concern, all stemming back to religion. And so there's this amazing thing that happens, because I've seen it so many times, that a person comes in who is struggling and doesn't feel safe to talk about what they're going through with their community. So often, more often than not, the very first time they get to talk about it is either in the helpline that Helen already talked about it, or in the support groups. It's just a beautiful thing to participate in as a support group leader and as a participant as well. We have nearly 65 groups around the world, including 2 virtual ones. You can find the nearest one to you at the link in the chat, and it's on our website at recoveringfromreligion.org as well. Next up is the Secular Therapy Project. We've got someone on today who can talk more expertly about it than I can. But if you're looking to connect with a mental health professional, because the helpline that we talked about, the support groups that we talked about, those are both peer support. And so that means that there is no real expert training involved in the Recovering from Religion ecosystem, like on the professional side. So we may need more than what peer support can offer. And so that's why we've set up the Secular Therapy Project, to find a mental health professional that will work for you. These mental health professionals, they are screened and vetted to ensure that they have the appropriate licensing in their state or in their country, to make sure that they're maintaining a secular practice so you won't be proselytized to, and to make sure that they exclusively use evidence-based treatments. And so you can take a look for one near you, get an account at seculartherapy.org. Helen, online community?
Oh yeah. So as I was talking more, when you're one of the best things for you to get a little bit of healing, a little bit of hope, is to hearing stories, connecting with people that are on the same path that you are. And a great way to do that is through our online community. This is done through Slack, though you need to be invited. So if you connect with one of our agents, either through the chat line or through the phone line, and they think that you are a good candidate for the online community, you'll get an invite. And basically, this is where you can connect to other people that have been through the same sort of experiences that you're going through, whether you are Jehovah's Witness or a former Catholic, or you are Jewish or Muslim or LGBTQ plus, or a woman, whatever you have, that, whatever background you're from, we have a home for you with the online community. And this way you can connect with other people, find support, exchange stories, and just find a little bit more community. As I said, because we're all in this together, we need to all support one another.
So without further ado, I am so excited to introduce you to Dr. McKie-Voerste. I know I screwed that last name up. I'm so sorry. He's an assistant professor of psychology at Dalton State College and teaches courses including counseling skills on the psychology of religion. He's also a co-director for the Secular Therapy Project and owns a private practice in Chatsworth, Georgia. Dr. McKie, welcome. I'm so glad you're here this evening.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Now, this is the first time you've been on an RFRX, and it has been
Yeah,
way overdue. And I am so glad that we get to kind of have this topic and bring it to RFRX, because it's super important. It's like one of the key things that I needed as I was transitioning out of religion.
for sure, for sure. Well, even as you were talking about some of the things in your introduction, I just sort of thought about, the newness of leaving religion and how that feels and can feel so lonely. And so, yeah, we see that quite a bit.
Yeah. Now, how long have you been a part of the Secular Therapy Project?
I don't know. I've been, it's been a few years. It's been a few years now, for sure. I haven't been keeping track of time. I guess I don't hate it that much that I'm like counting the
I
days
know,
or
right?
anything like that. I'm just part of it. I'm here and I'm enjoying it. So I'll have to look it up sometime. It's been a few years though.
So let's kind of get into the topic for today.
Yeah.
Finding a mental health therapist that's right for you. I know personally, I was hoping that like the first person that I sat down with, the first person I called, would be the right one for me. But more often than not, that's not the case.
Yeah, for sure. The easy way, if that option is available to you is to find the therapist through Secular Therapy Project. Even then, you might not find the right fit for you the first time, but we've done a lot of the heavy lifting for you, in that process. But some of us live in areas of the country, and I'm in one of those areas of the country where sort of religious affiliation is assumed, and a lot of the therapists fall in that same boat where they oftentimes will assume that their clients are going to be religiously affiliated, and it can make it really hard to find somebody.
I had never considered that. I would walk into a therapy thinking that this guy has a certain belief system or something like that, but I never thought about it from the other person's shoes, from the therapist's shoes, like them assuming that I might be religious walking into their
And they shouldn't
practice.
that is part of the problem that we're really trying to address. In my training, certainly that was something that was stressed pretty heavily, that it's not about the therapist's values, and we have to be aware of those so we can ensure that we're not imposing those types of things. But it seems like in some parts of the country that training seems to fade really quickly, and that shouldn't happen.
We have volunteers that I get to connect with that are all over the world, Europe and Australia. And when I kind of share about this phenomenon of walking into a therapy session and the therapist kind of doing some religious thing for me, they're just shocked. It's like it's unheard of in some of those countries. It seems to be kind of a phenomenon here in the US. And is that kind of one of the main reasons why Secular Therapy Project was set up?
I don't think it's just a U.S. problem. I think there are religious, concentrations in any place that we look in the world. Even within countries, there's big variation sometimes. Within the United States, we have large variation, pretty significant variation. Depending on where you are, what state you are in. If we're looking, more like Northeast, we have very low religious affiliation, and I think the religious assumption is way lower. My experience, or a lot of what my experience was informed by, is by first moving to the United States as a teenager from Germany, and then moving from the northern state, Minnesota, to the south, and so I got to experience a lot of that difference. So a lot of the different types of questions that people ask and are assumed to okay to ask. It was really surprising, and so that's really what got me interested in looking at this. And then when I saw that also applied in the therapeutic environment, which I assumed and hoped, and my experience was that that's the safe place. But I heard so many clients that have had experiences where they're therapists, and not a Christian therapist, or not like a counselor that they saw it through their church, is suggesting these religious interventions that we obviously know don't really help. So
Yeah. So let's say I'm fresh off the turnip truck. I've fallen off and I realize I need some help. I need to find a professional. And honestly, just getting to that point can be a huge step for some folks. I know it was for me and the generation that I grew up with. What would be my first step?
I mean, I think those processes that you talked about already, you know, we have such great resources out there through Recovering from Religion, you know, just to find a community. But finding that community is a great first step. Now, if you're seeking specifically mental health treatment, the Secular Therapy Project is such a great resource. Like I mentioned in the beginning, we've done a lot of the work for you. You know, we have therapists that apply to there that sort of identify that maybe they don't have a God belief, but they still have some supernatural beliefs, and those get screened out. Or we have therapists that apply that may not have spiritual or religious beliefs, but their practice really isn't founded in any evidence-based treatments. They're kind of winging it, so to speak. So we weed all those people out for you, essentially. So if you can, I think that is the easiest way to sort through a lot of the therapists that are probably not going to be a good fit for you if you left religion. And these are folks also that have sought us out for some reason or another. So they're interested in helping people who are struggling with religion or who are leaving religion. It's still similar to the mission of the support groups. It's not about deconverting anybody, but you have people that are familiar with that process and understand, to some degree at least, religious trauma and those kinds of things.
Do you find that since the Secular Therapy Project started up, people are finding a therapist that's more catered to them than kind of like, you know, what Eric was saying, like going through so many before you find one that's like a good fit for you?
Yeah, and we have variation. We have different concentrations of where therapists are located. You know, so there are parts of the country where, you know, it's much more spread out, and you might have to, you know, do telehealth in order to connect with therapists that are a little bit more distant. In other parts, you know, in sort of more the metropolitan areas, you know, we have several therapists that are registered through our site. So I do think that it helps with that process where you don't have as many to go through to find the right fit for you. Absolutely.
Now, even though, let's say, because I know that when we go to the Secular Therapy Project, we have to create an account, and we search by, for here in the US, search by zip code, find the one that's nearest to us or in our state. Even with that list of people, there still may be somebody when I first meet them I don't connect with. What are during the first kind of meeting, what sort of things should I be doing? Should I be letting them sort of take the meeting where it needs to go, or is there another way to kind of do this?
The first couple of meetings, and I think especially the first one, you're feeling each other out, essentially. You know, you are getting to know your therapist. Sometimes, you know, if they work at an agency, there are certain things that they have to do. So it can feel, I think, a little bit more formal. And, you know, they have to do things like informed consent, and they're getting background information. And sometimes there can be pressure on the therapist that they have to get sufficient information to get a diagnosis for like insurance reasons and those kind of things. And so those can be things that sometimes get in the way of you really getting a sense of like, who's this therapist. As a client, I would definitely slow folks down a little bit and kind of say, hey, you know, I've got some questions. And I'll have some recommendations as far as like, hey, what kind of questions can we get to? Hey, let's talk about maybe the informed consent, but in order to be informed, I have some questions for you. I have some questions for the therapist, such as, hey, what is your approach? That is part of like my informed portion of to agree. The client has to agree to receive a treatment, just like if you get a surgery or something like that, they're going to say, hey, there's some risks involved with the treatment that you're about to receive. These are the risks. Do you still want to do this? Same thing counts for therapy. The therapist is going to tell you, hey, here's some risks involved. And just like I might have some questions for my surgeon, hey, have you done this kind of thing before? If they're like, well, the first time for everything, I read a book on it once. I'm gonna ask some other questions, right? I'm gonna be like, is there somebody gonna be there that's gonna like supervise this? And so those are the same kind of questions that you can ask your therapist. Have you worked with somebody that's non-religious before? Now, you can ask your therapist if they are religious, and that's something that we do in the secular therapy project. Therapists may be trained not to answer that because it shouldn't impose on them. A lot of therapists may choose to answer that question, but just because they say, I usually don't talk about what my religious beliefs are, that's not necessarily a no-go, but they may tell you that. But you can ask that question, certainly. And you can at least ask, are you comfortable working with somebody have you worked with others that are non-religious or who are leaving religion, struggling with religion? Do you have, what's your approach with that?
Yeah, I like that. I really kind of like how you were just saying, slow it down, slow it down. I feel like when I get into when I first meet a new therapist or something, I want to, okay, hurry up and fix me. Hurry up and fix me. I got shit to do. I got places. I got people to do and places to be. And so hurry up and let's just get this done. But kind of giving, it sounds like you just basically gave me permission to just kind of like slow down and get this right. If it doesn't feel right, then should I be relying kind of on my gut? If I have had a session and there's just something that doesn't quite feel right, or too, like how would I kind of evaluate whether or not to set another appointment with this person?
Yeah, I think if you at least feel respected in that process, I think your gut sort of, and I think what we mean by that is like, what's my emotional reaction, to how this went down. That can give us some really good information. And so to sort of check in with yourself afterwards and like, hey, what was it about that I felt uncomfortable with? It may be just that you are uncomfortable, and because therapy can be sort of a scary thing to get started with. So to check in with yourself, was it that or was it something else? Did I not feel heard? Did they dismiss some of the things that I said to them, or maybe even blatantly ignored some of those things? And those are stories that I hear from folks sometimes, where they will tell their therapist outright, like, hey, I don't want you to use any kind of religious intervention because I've had bad experience with that. And then sometimes even in that same session, the therapist will, drop a Bible quote or something like that, or suggest, that they just haven't found the right church or something like that. Those would be the obvious flags where like, okay, and I think most of us would recognize that, hey, that's not okay, and I'm not going to go back there. So I do think it's a good idea to sort of reflect, what was it about that? And sometimes you might be comfortable in addressing that with the therapist, and I think that can be very helpful. And it might get to the level where you're just like, hey, this is obviously not the place for me. I think for a lot of folks, just even going into the waiting room has been an experience. If they see a lot of religious literature and those kind of things, they're like, okay, nope, not for me.
Oh, that's a good point.
Are they, so kind of bouncing off of that a little bit, are they allowed to, like, I guess it depends on the state, but I know that most therapists have to have like a state license and to practice, and usually have to follow some sort of state approved curriculum to, keep their
Mhm.
practice going. And if they start using a lot of religious language, which isn't part of a lot, like, if you're going for like, cognitive behavioral therapy for like OCD, and they start using religious language that isn't part of that type of therapy, is there an issue like ethically with that can, people should be aware of?
Yeah, absolutely. The different professions within the mental health field, have similar codes of ethics. And a lot of times those are tied to the law, but not every time. And then one of the first part of your question, I think, was about, aren't people required to be licensed? And like, yes, but some states have some exceptions. Like in Georgia, for example, you can't call yourself a counselor unless you've had specific training, except for if you're doing things within a religious based doctrine. So you are legally allowed to call yourself just a counselor if you're practicing from like a biblical perspective or something like that.
Oh,
So
wow.
just because somebody says that they're a counselor
Ah,
doesn't necessarily mean that they're a counselor in Georgia. Other states, it is protected. The last state that I practiced in Arkansas, it was something. Now, Arkansas, you probably think still, hey, this is pretty Bible centric and religious centric state. But they did actually a pretty good job of protecting, who can call themselves a mental health professional. So I think it is important, like in Georgia, I would say, hey, make sure that they say that they're a licensed counselor and they can show you their license. We have to show that we have a license, kind of like when you get your hair cut. A lot of times you got their license there. My license looks exactly like the barber's license, right? But I got to display. It says slightly different words on top of there, but the process is the same. You have to be able to see that. I've got training
hey,
for it.
barbers have been equated to therapists, so
Well, yeah, that's a referral source right there.
School of psychology and the school of cosmetology are right next door to each other, I would imagine.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so like I'm kind of picking like where we were talking about before. So like if someone like they see like counselor and you ask for their license and they're like, yes, I'm board approved or whatever, and then they start using like religious language as part of their therapy, like does a client have the right to like report it to a board and to have like the therapist reviewed?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
I
Um,
figured as much, but I just wanted to clarify. So,
yes, and I would love if that would happen more often. Honestly,
mm,
may it sound like I'm shooting myself in the foot here, but for therapists that are practicing ethically, that really shouldn't be an issue. We have to share with you, like, hey, who do you report this stuff to? So on like my practice website, I have a link to those places on where you can report me when I screw up. This is who you would tell. And we can have some state and some national levels that you can do that. So you can report those infractions to the state board, who can react to things. And that does vary by state by state. We've some of you may have heard about like some of the exceptions that Tennessee had put into their laws, where Tennessee was one of the states that fully integrated the ethical code for counselors into their law and said, hey, this is actually something that you have to do if you're a counselor, except for when it interferes with state law. And they made the state law that you are allowed to refuse to see clients based on these sincerely held beliefs.
Jeez.
And so we have a conflict with the code of ethics and the state law. It's a legal thing. So the state board in that case really can't do anything about it. So for clients that were seeking somebody in Tennessee, I always recommend to look for a nationally certified counselor. because at least there was that while they couldn't lose their license,
Oh,
they could lose their national certification. So it's
Mhm.
sort of just an extra level that there's another code that they have to adhere to in order to maintain that credential.
I just now am understanding that there's several different credentialing that a mental health professional can get
Mhm.
in the state or nationally.
Mhm.
We actually have a question here that I think would be a perfect time to ask it. I'm trans and I can't find a therapist that will take me on. All the therapists tell me that it's unethical to help me not be trans. They all want me to affirm my identity, even though doing so has ruined my life. How would a member of the LGBTQ community in, let's say, a state or an area that's not friendly to uh, those people, how would they find safe therapists?
Yeah. Um, I think if you yeah, again, the hard work is sort of done, like through the Secular Therapy Project, and generally I would say that the therapists that we have are going to be LGBT affirming therapists. If you check on their websites, I like to look for therapists that have a statement that they are an affirming practice, so you can kind of see on the front end. In some areas, therapists are hesitant to advertise these kinds of things, and that's another reason on why we have the Secular Therapy Project, because it's not just a resource for clients, but also for therapists who kind of recognize that, hey, there's an issue out here. They want to advertise. They want to let the community know that this is a safe place for secular folks. But in some areas of the country, even advertising that openly can have detrimental effects on the therapist's practice. So we do a little bit of this also for the therapist to protect them. Um, so I'm also a big fan of just other communities. So if you're in, and Facebook and these local communities can be such great resources. Asking other folks from within that community, hey, have you found somebody that provides affirming
Oh,
care, is such a great resource. I'm on several local secular groups that have their own little resource list for therapists in the area that have done a good job for them.
And just to be clear, like the Secular Therapy Project isn't a hotline; it's a place to register to get therapy. Correct?
Correct. Yeah, it can take a
Yeah.
little bit of time. So there's a registration process for the clients, and then it's a directory essentially. So you can find therapists based on like a radius, or you can select therapists in the state that will do telehealth and those kind of things, and then you can communicate with that therapist through the platform. So you can send them a message and reach out, ask them questions, that we've already kind of talked about here, and then they will get back to you, and you are just connecting with them based on their practice. I think we've got several things sort of in the works, to help sort through some of the questions, even that were addressed in some of the chats. I saw one of them was, hey, do you have anybody that speaks ASL? I think that would be great things that we could have that as a searchable feature within the Secular Therapy Project, or search specifically for medication prescribers and those kind of things. So we're continuously trying to explore it, but yeah, it's just a matching service essentially.
Mhm.
Insurance is sort of another question that comes up a lot of times. Hey, will my therapist accept my insurance plan? We don't have a really good way of searching for that. So that can be part of the process where you have to
hmm.
ask them, hey, am I networked with your insurance as well?
Recovering
It
from
sounds
religion
like
is
it's a lot like dating. I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
Eric. Go ahead.
It's a dating swipe left, swipe right. Yeah.
Right.
is that what the Secular Therapy Project app is going to look like? Just
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
It's going to be just like Tinder.
It sounds like just like recovering from religion as a whole, the secular therapy project is sort of working to kind of revamp how they're presented to the client and the therapists as well. I know that RFR 3.0 is kind of coming up, and the secular therapy project is sort of integrated into that as well. So it sounds like even though there may not be like a box to check, like, hey, I speak Spanish or I know ASL, that eventually there will be down the line.
Yes, yes. I was looking at I guess Daryl's comment that it was built on online dating sites model. So yeah. Yeah.
What I see a lot of people kind of hanging the shingle out saying that they're a life coach. What would be the difference between a counselor or a therapist or a life coach? Can I get sort of the same kind of results with a life coach as I would with a mental health professional?
Yeah, I've been seeing more and more that question, and I think it's a really good question. I've seen some therapists that are also, they get like a coaching certification, and sort of they're using the coaching license in order, like, sort of to, or their coaching status to provide services across state lines, because it's something that's not regulated very well. And to me, that's a very sketchy practice to do that. So just coaching is not something that is very well regulated. And there may be some states I'm not familiar with that are trying to regulate that maybe a little bit more. But I would be very, very careful with using that as a way to treat mental health problems.
Yeah, it seems like a very new agey sort of like, positive life affirming sort of thing, like how to get your, how, like, you're standing your own way and that kind of those messaging and stuff like that, than
Yeah.
actually getting work for people that actually have mental health issues and those need to be treated, you know, um, it, that's how I kind of feel about it. Like, I'm like, that's not
Yeah.
therapy.
I
So-
think one of the differences that I tend to see is that there can be sort of this dependent relationship that gets developed through that process, and that's not the goal of therapy. The goal of therapy is to empower the individual. And with coaching, like I said, it can sometimes foster a dependence on the coach, and I'm probably generalizing here, but yeah, I wouldn't be comfortable in using that as a way to seek help.
You bring up a really good point. Way back in the day, I experienced something exactly like that with a coach, and then I have not experienced that with a therapist. That was some dark times, and I'm really glad that you kind of made that distinction. I hadn't recognized that until now.
Yeah.
Let's kind of get at the really core of this. Like, what would I get out of even attending or seeking out therapy? What's in it for me?
I mean, at the base level, therapy is for treating mental health concerns, but counseling specifically, and that is my license, as I'm a professional counselor, operates from a wellness model. So we really want to try to get, help you empower you to function at the best level that you can. Because a lot of times we still are working within a medical model, we still have to do things like, the diagnoses and all those kind of things that we're sort of bound by. And it sometimes helps us direct, the treatment. So one of the things, in secular therapy project and that we were talking about today is this idea of evidence-based treatment. And so what that means is that we do have to sort of know, like, hey, what are we treating in the first place? So we can identify what is the best way to treat this. So if we're talking about things, probably the most common things that I see are things like depression and anxiety and various forms of that. Also, different levels of trauma and those kind of things. So we're trying to lessen the impact of those states on your life. People come to therapy because they don't like the way that they feel. They don't like the way that things feel around them. They don't like the way that their relationships fail or that they're struggling with. And so we're trying to help you identify how to remove those barriers, change your thinking to have you live a more successful life and live in a way that you can function at your best.
One of the things that really early on I felt is like the people who went to therapy, they had something wrong with them. Like not like I'm struggling with money, or my wife and I or my partner and I aren't getting along, but like there was some sort of mental issue, and that's why they went and saw a therapist. I feel personally like I've learned that isn't necessarily the case, but I maybe have some mental issues. I don't know.
Yeah, like I say, that wellness model, is focused more on improving the way and maximizing the way that you are. So I think really the healthiest people are the ones that can kind of recognize that, hey, you know what, I'm not functioning the way that I want to be. We have different markers. I don't know, we probably have these different expectations about what my life is supposed to look like. And sometimes I think on the surface, like, okay, no, I got a job, I'm in a steady relationship, all that stuff can look good on paper. But if you're still recognizing that, hey, I'm not where I want to be and I'm still uncomfortable with that kind of means that, maybe I can function better. And, the first steps usually are trying to identify that yourself. And for a lot of folks, that works. If you kind of spend that process, you're checking in with friends and you have supportive friends, and you can recognize and work through some of those things. But sometimes you run up against some barriers that, hey, I've tried all these things and it's still not getting better. And a therapist is going to be able to help with that.
The way you're kind of talking about these sessions, it feels like it's not like a lifelong type of commitment. I like
Absolutely.
when I think about people like Woody Allen, or something, who was like all talking that he's always been to a therapist for like,
Yeah.
Half a century or something like that. That's kind of
Right.
how I initially envisioned getting a therapist would be, like forever. But the way you're kind of talking about it, it doesn't have to be that way, and most of the time it's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, absolutely. We're still fighting Freud at this point. That psychodynamic model of, that you're in treatment 3 to 4 times a week, for a couple of hours and laying on the couch. We still see that a lot, portrayed in movies and those kind of things, and again, so when I was sort of talking about that coaching, it's that dependent type of relationship sometimes that is portrayed, and that's really not what we're looking for. And that's the benefit of seeking a therapist that's trained in some evidence-based treatments, because they have a model that they're going to use to say, hey, this is what the person has going on. They're going to go through a specific treatment regimen, and there's an end goal in sight for this model. Now, sometimes, there's additional things that can kind of come up. Maybe we work through the depression, but maybe there's some relationship issues. But each one of those things really deserves, an evidence-based model to treat that along the way. And absolutely, for most of the clients that I see, I see them between, maybe 10 and 20 sessions. Some less, some, after 6 sessions, like, hey, we kind of learned some new skills, we can kind of work through it. And then you're done, and I never see them again. And that's great news. Sometimes they'll send me like, hey, 2 years later, I'm still doing great. And, that's nice to hear as a therapist. But most of the time, we just never hear from them again. And that feels good. That's what it should look like.
So what would I expect to pay for a session? I know that it probably varies widely from area to area. do you have like a kind of a range in mind?
Yeah, that is a tough question. You know, for if you have insurance, that is probably going to be the biggest thing that's going to dictate what you're going to pay. Now, a lot of therapists are that you may find do not accept insurance. So then you're looking at your out-of-network benefit. And, you know, so yeah, the world of insurance is terribly complicated and probably deserves some revision. But for cash pay, you know, for sort of a self-pay out-of-network, depending on where you are in the country, I'd say between, on the low end, probably $100 an hour to, on the high end, you know, $300-400 an hour.
Wow.
If they're really specialized in something. Yeah, it's really awful. Even within the same insurance companies, you know, it can have huge differences in copays that people have to pay and deductibles. Like right now, you know, we just started a new year, so a lot of people, you know, if you're on a high deductible plan, are paying you know, the full rate, you know, that the insurance negotiated. If you can find a therapist that accepts it, you know, and like in my practice, we try to accept insurance as much as we can. And I do that because, you know, I'm in a low income area, and we try to accept, you know, we're there to help people. You know, it's maybe not the best money making model, but I think it helps people have access to a service that can be difficult to access sometimes. There are some sliding fee providers that will do income-based things, and those are really great options as well. And, you know, now I'm thinking about it, I think that would be another great feature for the secular therapy if we include you know, therapists that accept sliding fee scales in the future.
Can therapists like practice across state borders? I know there's like multi-state licenses they can get, and if you're going to do that, is connecting them online okay, or do you find that person-to-person therapy is better?
You know, throughout the pandemic, we have gotten much better at telehealth. You know, I think pre-pandemic, there were a lot of therapists that were really uncomfortable with it. A lot of therapists were just forced to become comfortable with it. Telehealth in many states is something
Right.
that is separately licensed. You know, I've done a lot of online and telehealth therapy since the start of the pandemic myself. So it is appropriate in some cases. You know, in many cases, as a matter of fact, I think it is appropriate to do telehealth, and it can work really well. Not in all cases. You know, if you have somebody that is really going through severe depression, maybe are suicidal, where you need to have a little bit more access to the client, sometimes it's best to have in-person sessions, or at least have a therapist that is close by for, you know, that quick access. The second part of your question, as far as, you know, practicing across state lines, yeah, the therapist does need to be licensed typically in the state that the client is located in. But yeah, several therapists can be licensed, or therapists can be licensed in multiple states. So that definitely is an option as well. I see several comments in the chat here that, you know, yeah, and I like actually this one. It's great for people that are anxious about getting out of the house. You know, so as a way to access, you know, a therapist, it also provides access for clients that are maybe, you know, more remote, just to have access to a therapist that maybe is secular. And yeah, so it provides a lot of benefit potentially as well. I'm licensed, for example, in Florida and Georgia currently. Should be licensed probably in Tennessee. I'm pretty close to that, but.
So you get to provide therapy to that Florida man.
Yeah, I try to avoid it when I can. But.
Please tell him get set straight. Or actually, I take it back. Don't work with him anymore, because I'm enjoying the news way too much.
Florida man
So,
or therapy.
They just can't have access to alligators. If they didn't have access to alligators, things would be fine.
Yeah. Yeah,
get them
folks are
grounded.
kind of talking about, like, their therapist going on vacation abroad, and so as long as it's really in most states it's about where the client is located. So the therapist can in many cases be wherever the heck they want to be, as long as they're licensed in the state is where the client is located.
One of the things, the tropes that we imagine when we're thinking about a therapist or psychoanalyzing or something is we talk about our past. We talk about our parents, our siblings, our family members, but we might have just gone into the therapy thinking like, hey, I'm not happy with my job right now. Do those kinds of do we have to bring up some of those past traumas or those past feelings in order to really deal with what we're going through now? Is that what happens inside of these sessions?
No, not necessarily. There's different models of therapy. I mean, there's going to be some therapists that are really solution focused, for example, that are really just focusing on a single problem. And sometimes we're limited in time, so things like EAP, which is an employee assistance programs, through work, sometimes you have 3 sessions. It's not going to be a good model to, really talk about a long history of trauma. Now, for some work, that is going to be an appropriate way to look at some issues. But it doesn't have to be that way. Absolutely. And you may not be ready to work on specific issues, and a therapist is going to recognize it. And you can tell that to your therapist too, like, hey, I'm not ready to talk about that trauma, and you can have a discussion about that with them.
Can you also I found as I was kind of working through with the therapist recently that they asked a few questions, but then they kind of went a route that they thought was best, or what they thought I wanted to talk about, and I didn't really want to talk about that. And so I kind of switched things around, and I was like, hey, the next session I want to talk about my concept of my body image. Next session I really want to talk about my relationship with my parents. Is that okay to do, to kind of just say, hey, knock it off? I want to talk about what I want to talk about for right now. Work.
So the thing I like is, and I train students in how to do some counseling skills and those kind of things. And sometimes the students are also the clients in that case, and so they have to act as the clients, and they always ask, what do I have to do as a client? I always have to tell them, as a client, you don't have any rules. You can do whatever the heck you want, right? And if you want to tell the therapist that, hey, I don't want to talk about that, screw off, that's fine. Now, if the therapist sort of has some reason on why that is important, they should communicate that to you. I tell my clients is like, hey, none of this should be a mystery. If you have a question about, hey, why are we talking about this? That's a fair question. And I should be able to give you an answer for that. Every now and then I might have just sort of this curiosity thing. It's like, whoa, what happened there? But I try to avoid that, because that's really not what we're there for. We're not there for my curiosity or for my entertainment. We're there.
We are not pets for your amusement, Travis.
Yeah, right.
I mean, we are not here for your amusement.
That happens afterwards. So yeah, no, you can ask the therapist, why are we talking about this? And they should be able to provide you with an answer. That should really be part of the treatment protocol, the treatment plan that you worked out. And if it's not working for you, you kind of say that, hey, you know what, this isn't working for me. I think we need to go in this direction, and you work through that with your therapist. You can identify maybe something that is more helpful.
Oh yeah. Someone was asking in the chat, like, is it okay for you to go in and record a session that you have with your therapist? I would assume so, for review later, or is that like for your own personal use, not to like put out on like the interwebs or something like that.
Yeah. Ask your therapist. I would, just kind of let them
Yeah.
know, like, hey, I'd like to record this for my own review. And actually there's some therapeutic techniques where we actually ask the client to record things for review. So if you ever done any kind of like prolonged exposure type of therapy dealing with some trauma, that might be part of the protocol to actually record that and for you to re-listen to some things. So yeah, absolutely. I think it is okay. Just have a conversation with your therapist about it. Let them know on why you want to do that. But yeah, just, get permission, I would say. If they don't want to, and you really want to talk through it with the therapist, but there's no rule against it.
I think just mutual respect. This is probably a good thing.
Yeah. And the therapist may ask you to record a session. We do that for supervision purposes sometimes, if therapists are getting supervision or, getting a case review. So, your therapist may ask you, and they shouldn't be recording you without your consent. So I think it's a nice kind of reciprocal thing that, hey, I may be recording you as well. So absolutely.
There's a lot of initialisms around the different therapists, and they seem to change from one state or one country to the next, like LMFT versus LPC versus, I don't know, FU big time or something like that. There's just a lot of different letters. I mean, is that important to kind of understand before kind of getting into a relationship with a therapist? Relationship doesn't sound right.
I think it's fair to use a relationship, but it is good to know a little bit. And if you don't know, it's okay to ask your therapist. Hey, you're an LPC. What does that mean? Or you're an LMFT. So that's licensed professional counselor in my state. And that's a pretty common one. But if you're seeing an LMFT, like you said, that's a marriage and family therapist. That is going to change their approach, their perspective sometimes a little bit. So I asked them about that. How, tell me about, your profession. What are your professional values? They do have slightly different codes of ethics, and those are things that you can look up as a client. So yeah, there are some distinctions, a lot of confusion still from folks, between like psychiatrists and counselors and psychologists and marriage and family therapists, and what do they all do and what's their differences. Ask questions, and ultimately, that's probably the biggest thing that I can tell you is, we ask questions. If we're doing screening for the secular therapy project, we ask a lot of questions to the people that want to be listed on there. And you can do the same thing. So even with therapists that are part of the secular therapy project, ask them questions, but especially when they're outside of that, what's your license? What does that mean if you don't know? Are you using an evidence-based practice? Well, do you know as a client necessarily what all the evidence-based practices are? Maybe not. There are resources out there. I think APA Division 12 has a great list of evidence-based practices, which one of these has been researched. Most therapists are probably going to, if you ask them, hey, is this evidence-based? They're probably saying,
right.
But, based on what research? So, you can do a little bit of research and ask some questions of folks.
Just off the top of your head, I know it's not at all going to be comprehensive, but what are some evidence-based treatments that I could look for on somebody's website or ask them about?
Yeah, probably the most common one that you're going to see, if you go again, I'm going to mention just quickly that Division 12 APA, American Psychological Association website. If you can sort evidence-based practice either by the theory in itself, or by a diagnosis. So you can kind of look up like, hey, for depression, what are the different treatment methodologies that have been shown to work for it? Probably the most common one that you're going to see is cognitive behavioral therapy. That was mentioned before as well. Cognitive behavioral therapy and some variations thereof. So you might see things like REBT, rational motive behavioral therapy, or dialectical behavioral therapy. So those are just kind of a few things that are out there, but there's quite a few different approaches that are still being investigated, and they produce that list pretty nicely. They say, hey, we're still unsure about this one. This one has moderate research support. Moderate is a pretty safe one. If the APA says it has moderate support for it, that's actually pretty decent. And then kind of the highest level is like strong research support for it.
What could possibly go wrong if a non-evidence-based treatment was used?
Oh my gosh.
Right. And you have 2 hours to
You opened up a
talk
can of
about
worms.
this.
Yeah. Oh my God. The list is long. I mean, one of the first principles obviously is that we shouldn't be doing harm, and some of these treatment methodologies can do real harm. Probably the one that we hear a lot still, unfortunately about in the news are things like, these conversion therapies and stuff like that, which can do some real psychological damage. Some other treatment methodologies aren't necessarily, we have treatment methodologies like EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization rationalization, that has a really strong CBT component to it. And the eye movement component of that doesn't seem to be adding that much to it. It seems to be fine. It works for a lot of folks. Doesn't seem to be doing it doesn't do any damage from what we can tell, but it doesn't seem to be adding that much to it. The research is still ongoing. There's some controversy about it. I don't have necessarily a huge problem with it. I don't know, probably wouldn't be my treatment approach, but electronic dance music revolution, that would be another version. No, that's not. That's not another one, but yeah, no, we can do some real damage potentially, sometimes just by it's not working. You're spending a lot of time and money on something that hasn't been shown to work. I'd be pretty pissed about that, honestly. We've seen some folks kind of talking about how much they're paying for therapy, and if you're paying $300 an hour for something that doesn't work, if I go to my car mechanic and he says he's got to replace the jonculator, I probably want to know what the heck that does.
Jonculates.
Well, I think that's jonculates. But I think that's an important message, though, that it is okay to dump your therapist. Like,
yeah. Oh yeah.
I think people are afraid to, because they're, maybe after a few sessions they invested all this time and money, but they're not progressing, but it's like, it's okay to dump your therapist and find a new one.
Yeah.
If you're not getting the care you need.
I think it's really hard sometimes when you like your therapist. Just because you like your therapist doesn't mean that they're a good therapist,
Oh, that's a great distinction.
Yeah, like I hear that all the time. I was like, oh, I had a really nice therapist. I really liked them. I could have been friends with them or something like that. Like, oh, I'm always kind of.
Or they might be a good therapist, but not suited for you.
What's that?
I said it, but they can be a very good therapist, but they're just not suited for you, for what you need.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's like friendships. Like some people are really good for you and some people aren't, and you got to kind of decide. Like, I have like NyQuil friends that I see only in small doses, and then I have other friends that I formed more of a close emotional bond with. It just depends.
Sure.
So this sounds
Yeah.
like it's not something that just happens. It actually would take work on my part, the client, to kind of know what's working for me and what isn't working for me. And then, um, I'm not necessarily always the most forthright, but it also might sound like I'll need to kind of like say, hey, this isn't working, buddy. We either need to shift tactics, or I got to find another therapist.
And your therapist can be using tools to track if there's improvement that is happening. There's specific scales, and sometimes it may not feel like you're moving forward, and you actually are. So there's, if I have a client that's we're working on depression, we'll do some depression scales and track that over time, to see if there's improvement happening, and you can ask for those tools and kind of look at those tools together. If I have a client that says, gosh, we've been working on this, it doesn't seem to be going any better, I'll pull out and say, look at your progress, and so sometimes, when we have small changes that happen over time, it feels like it's not improving, but it may be, and some folks improve really quickly, and others the process is a little bit slower for, but overall you should see improvement. And you should recognize it. Maybe you kind of have to spend a little bit of time to kind of look at that. If they're like, hey, where was I, a couple of months ago, and how's things feel different for me now? You should be able to recognize some of those things. Maybe you need a little bit of help to, sort through that, but yeah, ask for those things.
Awesome. Let's shift back to the secular therapy project a little bit. Do you happen to know off the top of your head, how many therapists are available through STP?
Off the top of my head, 577 therapists as of today.
Can you be a little more precise?
We have also 8 in progress. No.
Brilliant. So this is 577 therapists around the world. That really doesn't seem like a whole lot.
We need more. We absolutely need more. And those 577 therapists, what we're finding is that a lot of folks are pretty full right now. We do have folks that are reaching out and saying, hey, and therapists are coming back and saying, I don't have room. And so we definitely need more therapists. And actually, that's something that I wanted to point out. If you do this work, if you've gone through the process of you vetting a therapist that fits for you, and you've identified somebody that's non-religious or using evidence-based practice, if you've seen some progress, tell them, like, hey, do you know about this thing called the Secular Therapy Project? You might be a good fit, and we'll vet them too. And they may not make it, and then they'll be really mad, but we'll deal with that.
Therapist throwing a temper tantrum.
It happens.
He's talking to his therapist about it. I didn't get in.
That's right. That's also good for business, right? But yeah, we still need more people. We still got folks from different parts of the world that email us. I had a woman from Nigeria email me and kind of say, hey, is there anybody in my country? I really need a secular therapist. And so yeah, we definitely need folks. And I'd love to see this. Ultimately, I'd love to see this not be needed. It would be great if we could just trust that the therapists that we seek out are using evidence-based treatments and are not imposing values, and that's sort of a separate line of work that we're engaging in. As counselor educators really need to do that job of making sure that folks that can't create that separation are not allowed in the field. But we're still working. It sounds
like not everyone who applies gets in.
Correct. Yeah.
What would be like X number, like 10 people apply? How, like, what is the acceptance rate or rejection rate?
Um, I'd really
How-
be guessing. I'm not the screener on it, but it seems like quite a few people do get rejected. You know, we do have pretty high standards for STP
Mhm.
therapists. Um, you know, I'm maybe 40%,
Okay.
maybe higher, but quite a few get rejected. And not to say that they're not nice folks, or but maybe we just didn't have enough evidence that they're using, you know, evidence-based approaches. Maybe we didn't, you know, maybe they were you know, not part of religion, but they still had a lot of spiritual things going on, and you know, they're selling crystals on their website or something like that. Then they don't make the cut.
If I am reaching out, like so as a client and going to the Secular Therapy Project, I create an account and I can search near me or within my state in the US and stuff.
Mhm.
And look at the and if I reach out to like a therapist and I don't hear anything back,
Mm.
is there, like you had mentioned that the therapists are so booked out right now, is there a
Mhm.
way I can kind of communicate with the Secular Therapy Project itself to let them know I haven't heard back, or
Yeah,
is there a
we're
process
working
behind that?
on a process where therapists that aren't responding in a timely manner, that they kind of get dropped for the search until they really become active again, or sort of a way for them to indicate, you know, if they're not currently taking clients.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, if you don't get a response within a few days, you know, try to reach out to another therapist. You can let us know. You can reach out, you know, to the Secular Therapy Project and kind of just let us know, hey, I reached out to this therapist and I didn't get a response. We can sometimes just follow up with that therapist and kind of say, hey, are you getting your messages? There can be some technical issues that are going on there, or you know, they may just be full and not responding, and we try to eliminate that as much as we can. We definitely want clients to have the experience that when they find a therapist on the SDP, at least that they get a response back, and they can know what the status
Yeah.
is.
Dr. McKie, do you feel like there's anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to kind of cover?
Yeah, I was just kind of looking at my notes. You know, I've done some research in this area, and you know, and even looking at the poll, you know, a lot of folks kind of talk about that. You know, they've had therapists use some religious activity, some prayer, or you know, suggesting, you know, that they go to church. Those are really common things that I see and I hear, and it really hurts me as a therapist when I hear those stories, because it just does such a disservice to the profession. And you know, and doing interviews with clients who've not my clients, but like when I was doing research in this area, it just does such damage um, to the comfort and seeking help. and and that's just so sad to me, you know, when we remove that, when we add a barrier, you know, to somebody seeking help. And you know, this is a tough thing. You know, people get rejected, you know, based on their secular beliefs in so many areas, and it really just shouldn't be the case in counseling. And I think any counselor, you know, kind of worth their salt would agree with that. um, you know, but there's rejection in work settings and family settings that we sometimes have to be really afraid of, and counseling just shouldn't be and can't be one of those areas. You know, and that's probably the biggest thing that, you know, I hope that folks, even if you had a tough experience, or if you had a poor experience with the therapist, you know, let the Secular Therapy Project help you, or you know, hopefully you'll see some of these steps and feel comfortable in asking questions,
Mhm.
you know, to the person that's going to be doing work on you. You know, I'm thinking back to that idea of, you know, a surgeon that doesn't have experience. You'd be like, nah, I don't think so. Ask some questions like, hey, have you done this before? Are you comfortable in working on me? Those kind of things. Run away from folks that have the religious symbols on their website, that are displaying stuff in their waiting rooms and in their offices, those kind of things. I think other signs that you can look for as you're shopping for a therapist that's not on the STP is, look at their websites. Some of them will be super obvious, be like, I work with Christians or something like that, and obviously that you kind of know that they're not welcome, that you may not be welcome there. Sometimes, if you're looking at where did they receive their education, sometimes religious institutions, not an automatic no-go. I know we have a lot of therapists on the STP that may have gone to religious institutions, and that was their way out of religion, where they're like, yeah, no, this is baloney, and they learned something from that. So it's not a necessarily no, but I probably would ask some extra questions in that case. Liberty University, right? So yes, I think we may even have a therapist that went to a Liberty University. Obviously, we're going to do some extra screening on them, right? They got some splaining to do at that point. But deconversion can happen even there. So,
very good point. Dr. McKie, thank you so much for coming on and having this discussion with us. I really, really appreciated it. Honestly, I feel a little more empowered when I do, even though I am kind of searching for a therapist now. I feel much more empowered in order to go forward and understand my own role in this as well.
Awesome.
Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Helen, you got anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, this is a really good talk, because I think a lot of people don't know the tools to finding a good therapist and how to go about the process and stuff like that. So this was a really good talk, and getting the tools that you need and what kind of questions you need to ask and what to look for. So thank you. This is really, really informative. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Well, folks, that's going to kind of wrap up the discussion and Q&A part of RfRx, even though we kind of smushed it together. But we have another one coming up next week. And if you want, you can stick around. Dr. McKie has offered to stick around a little bit after we're done to kind of hang out with us. But next week, we're going to have another doctor on. And you've seen this doctor before. Dr. Andy Thompson is returning to us. And this RfRx, now I'm going to give you guys a trigger warning. We're going to be talking about suicide and death next week. Suicide, the tragic angel of our nature, with Dr. Andy Thompson. Suicide is an ever-present part of our human experience, be it through an acquaintance, friend, or family member taking their own life, or something even more personal, such as suicidal thoughts and attempts. When faced with suicide as close as someone coming to you for help or as distant as media reports, it can be daunting to know if you could have done something to prevent it. In this RfRx discussion, Dr. Andy Thompson will walk us through how to assess the signs, how to understand why suicide is a human universal, as well as why the risks are higher for veterans, trauma survivors, LGBTQ individuals, and the healthcare professionals. Folks, that's going to wrap up this RfRx show for today. I want to thank our troll smashers, Sasha and Rob. I want to thank my co-host, Helen. Thank you so much. Nikki, thank you so much for streaming this into the atheist community of Discord. Dr. McKie, again, thanks for being here. And Gail Jordan, you're amazing. Thanks for being here to support us. And Dr. Ray, you're okay. All right. You're right. You're okay.
He's all right.
All right.
We just let him hang out with us.
No, he wants to hang with the cool kids. Okay, we'll let him.
That's right. We're
all
the
right.
Cool Kids Club.